The 10 most important cameras in history, we're going to be debating what those are. We're going to say we started with 5, we pushed it to 10. We probably could have gone to 30, but we had to stop it somewhere. So we're going to talk about why we chose them and also where we think the future is going. We're getting into recent history that might be kind of highly debatable.
I think where the future is going is not using social media, but having your own presence on the web that you own, that you control. Getting your own domain name, like northrupphotography.com, chelseanorthrup.com. Get started making your own website today at squarespace.com/Chelsea. There's a free trial, so you can see how easy it is. And after you love it, the coupon code Chelsea will save you 10% off. You can take appointments from clients, set up a store, create a brand, customize everything to show off your work, your personal project, whatever it is. Thanks for sponsoring us, Squarespace.
Okay, let's get into the first one. Our first choice is the Kodak Brownie. And we're starting in the year 1900, so there are definitely cameras before that that were important. But this is the one that made photography accessible to the masses.
Yeah, it was $1, which is like $37 now, but that's still really cheap for a camera. And up until then, you had to be like a scientist, a chemist, to take these big pictures, like daguerreotypes and stuff.
And wet plates and chemicals and trying to figure it out on your own and make your own charts on how to do it. It was a process. And the Kodak Brownie was small and it was inexpensive and it was marketed towards families and kids and beginners. So a lot of people got them, including
Ansel Adams. His parents gave him one and took him on a trip to Yosemite, and the rest is literally history. By the way, speaking of history, we have a history of Kodak, of Ansel Adams, and of all the other companies we're going to be talking about. Entire podcast dedicated to them. So check our backlog of podcasts to hear all of that.
I never had a Kodak Brownie because I was not born around that time.
For the record, I am also not over 120 years old, so.
Our next camera choice is the Leica I.
I did buy this one new in 1913.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry, I was 13 years early. And, you know, this camera defined a lot. So I'm going to say, was it my favorite Leica when I bought it brand new in the Leica store? No, but it did define the entire format of how we shoot photography because it was the first camera that was 35 millimeter.
Yeah, the designer lights decided to make use of like film, like for motion pictures, and happened to use that 35 millimeter format, which is in our Sony A9 today and all those full frame cameras. Still the same aspect ratio, still the same shape. All these things that sort of define photography came from this one specific camera, and that's why it's so revolutionary.
Yeah, and I think there's something more. I mean, Leica's history is very rich, but Leica had this foothold of being an innovator. They were making really impressive lenses with very sharp optics, and their cameras were good, so much so that they attracted the attention of other countries that needed optics, including Japan, and they were directly copying Leica's innovation to make optics for military scopes and things like that. Once again, we have a whole podcast on that if you're interested.
Yeah, so Canon copied the bodies, Nikon copied the lenses.
Yes, and that's where our modern Canon and Nikon cameras started. That's how they were kind of born. So thank you, Leica, for that.
So fast forward through World War II, and we'll jump to the Polaroid camera, first released in 1948 by Edward Land.
Yeah, I chose this camera because I think that this is the first time we're changing the concept of what photography is supposed to accomplish. And the technology of a Polaroid camera is interesting for sure, but I think this is the first time we really see people using it socially. So you're taking a picture and you're immediately sharing it. And what's interesting to me is that you're doing it in a primitive form in the 1950s, but now we're doing the same thing where we want to instantly take a picture, make it social, and then share it to our social media. So I think that's kind of fun. It also made photography more accessible. So we see this pattern throughout researching this where when something is more affordable, more accessible, the popularity of photography is booming, and this camera definitely had its place.
And even in 2024, many of the most popular cameras are instant cameras today, like Fuji and Polaroid are still making cameras, and young people love them because they're anti-digital, but you still get the instant results.
I know the Instax cameras are like propping up all of Fuji. That should have been in there too.
So up until mid-50s, just about everything was a rangefinder, and Leica in particular, or Leica knockoffs, were really popular. But rangefinder cameras had real serious problems, especially for professional use, because you were looking through a rangefinder and that had to be synchronized to the lens for things like focusing and composition. And often things didn't line up. And a pro would go develop their film and it would all be out of focus because their camera was messed up. And then they have to send it back to Germany to get aligned. And it was just really hard. There was a better design, and that was the SLR, the single lens reflex camera, where the light comes through the lens and then bounces off a mirror and goes up to your eye.
Right, so you're looking through your lens and seeing exactly the picture that you're going to get.
Yeah, what you see is what you get was possible with an SLR. And the company that really popularized this was Nikon with their Nikon F body, which launched with their new F mount, which was the current mount up until 2018, from 1959 up until about 2018. Really long history there. And that really put Nikon ahead of Leica in sales and ahead of Canon and everybody else. That made Nikon the #1 camera, especially for professional photographers. And that's why all those old war photographers have a Nikon slung around their neck. I just watched the movie Civil War, and one of the main characters is a photographer who got the camera from her dad, and she's using an old Nikon F body. Like, that's how historic it is.
Yeah, and so many cameras, super popular cameras after that were SLRs. It really changed how we were taking pictures.
Yeah.
The next camera I chose, Sony, because I think it shifted photography, but nobody had one. It was more of a concept, and that was Kodak inventing the very first digital camera in 1975. It was massive. You can see it here. And it was invented by Steve Sasson. It never really went anywhere. First of all, it's huge, so I don't think anyone would have carried it around.
Yeah, it was slow.
I'm sure they could have developed it so that it was smaller, but the main thing is Kodak's bread and butter and how they were making all of their money is they were selling film, and they were developing film. And so a digital camera, though it was very cool, and we ended up using some of the tech from that first digital camera, it didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, but like the Baer filter that was introduced on that is still on just about every digital camera today.
Yeah, and the concept obviously took off. The idea was liked by the people.
So here's your actual first camera. Tell us about it. In 1990.
Oh, I had a Canon Rebel. So of course when I took photography classes when I was young, I used like school cameras or whatever. But the camera I used was a Canon Rebel. And it was easy, but it felt professional. It had that professional looking body before I really knew what I was doing. And so many people start with Rebels. I think every time we go to a big box store, we look and see what their camera selection is. And there's usually a Rebel in there.
Yeah. When I think of Rebel, I definitely think of the most amazing commercials of all time with Andre Agassi and that beautiful flowing hair.
That was a wig.
Oh man.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry, Andre. We can edit that out.
But it's historic for another reason too. Like in 1987, Canon introduced a whole new mount. They introduced a mount with a whole bunch of electronics in it, and that allowed them to do more sophisticated autofocus, more sophisticated auto exposure. And that would lead them to take the lead from Nikon, who refused to change their mount, who wanted to maintain backwards compatibility. Canon made that leap, and they kept that same mount up until 2018, from 1987 to 2018. And the Rebels are really what popularized that mount, along with the marketing around it.
I think that the mass appeal of the Rebel was what made it so important. When something catches on and it's popular, it's really shifting how cameras are made and how we're thinking about photography. And speaking of, our next camera definitely changed photography forever. Maybe one of the most game-changing ones. Mm-hmm. I know people think that term's overused, but this is a game changer. But first, speaking of game changers, if you want to change the game of your photography business or any business, you should check out our sponsor, Squarespace, because they make making professional websites easy. And not only that, they're catering to professional creatives. So if you love taking pictures professionally, but you're not so good at the paperwork, Squarespace has a way where you can put up booking your clients. You can have your waivers on there, your contracts. You can actually set up all sorts of consultations, and then you can sell things in a gallery. So it's a one-stop shop to help you be more professional, more efficient, and of course translate that into a more successful business. If you'd like to try your own, you can get a free trial for 14 days. And you don't have to remember to cancel. It's just done. So there's nothing to lose. Go to squarespace.com/Chelsea, and if you love it, which you will, you can use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off, and that's spelled CHELSEA, like the soccer club, football club.
Like my wife, actually.
And like me as well. All right.
Thanks, Squarespace.
I use the term game changer. So I've got to back it up now. Our next camera is the iPhone in 2007. And that was definitely a game changer. We've been talking about accessibility and ease, and iPhone was putting camera in everyone's pocket, but not only that, using a touchscreen and making it so intuitive and having autofocus and all of these things people love, and filters, making it feel creative.
It was a camera you captured pictures with, but you also consumed other people's pictures with. And it was so revolutionary when you could go on Instagram and see what all your friends were up to. And it changed how people took pictures.
Yeah, you're right, because now we were taking them to be viewed.
Yeah, and it changed the style of photography. We needed a constant series of pictures. We weren't taking 1 or 2 pictures a week like we used to. Now we're taking hundreds of pictures, often hundreds of pictures every day.
I probably took more pictures yesterday on my phone than every person ever took on the Kodak Brownie.
That could be.
But it definitely changed everything, and it kind of reminds me of the modern Polaroid, where it became more social, more sharing, more informative to our private lives, and it definitely made photography way more popular.
I had my next really emotional experience with a camera a decade later in 2017.
You were touched emotionally?
I was. Up until that point, well, the iPhone got more and more popular. We were using our Canon and Nikon DSLRs for everything. And mirrorless cameras were cute. They were fun. If you wanted to travel with something, they could get the job done. They were called bridge cameras because they weren't real cameras. The DSLRs were for the pros. Mirrorless, nice hobby cameras. But then Sony pulled us into New York City to try out the Sony A9, the very first one. And they put us in a hockey ring and put the cameras in our hands. And it did things our DSLRs could never do. And it made me realize mirrorless was absolutely the way forward, because we could point the camera at the hockey players and it would find their eye as they moved around. And when you push the shutter, it would take 20 frames per second silently with no viewfinder blackout. Like with the DSLRs, clap, 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 and the whole screen goes black. And I was like, wow, truly a game-changing experience.
Yeah, it was offering things that DSLRs just couldn't. Things that were supposed to be a professional camera suddenly couldn't compete. It was 2017, and that was the moment we said, okay, everyone's going to have to chase this to catch up. And sure enough, they did, because Canon and Nikon at that point were very resistant to mirrorless cameras, and in fact they were publicly kind of dissing them, and now suddenly they had to catch up as fast as they could and come up with their own pro line of mirrorless cameras. It was an interesting time.
And that same year there was another revolution in smartphone photography. The iPhone X really introduced computational photography, and I felt like that pushed smartphone photography to the next level, because up until that point you used a smartphone but nobody liked the results. With computational photography, suddenly smartphones could outdo even full-frame cameras in a lot of low-light handheld conditions. And with computational photography now, I can take a 30-second exposure of the stars without a tripod with a smartphone. It allows you to do amazing things, blur the background pretty convincingly. Not perfect, but good enough.
It didn't look good, the foca.
No, at the time it didn't look good, but it launched the generation of computational photography that has continued and eventually caused more and more traditional camera sales to disappear because people were more and more happy with their smartphone cameras.
Yeah, that was a pivotal moment when people are saying, hey, I think my photos look kind of professional from my phone. And we're just seeing more and more of that. Now, there are many, many more cameras that have been wonderful. I will not say the next one is my favorite camera or that I even like it.
I actually made a whole video hating on this camera when it was released.
But it cannot be denied, Tony, that this looks like it's the future. And that is the Samsung S23 Ultra. And if you remember the controversy in 2023, they said that they had this amazing zoom lens that could take a sharp picture of the moon, and then people discovered they were just using AI to put another picture into your picture.
Yeah.
But that seemed crazy last year in 2023, and now, doesn't it seem normal? Everyone's generating AI things. It's more widely acceptable.
Well, yeah, Google and Apple both did big marketing things around how they're integrating AI into their cameras now that Samsung has taken the hit for being bad about it.
The cutting edge bleeds, Tony.
Yeah.
So if you're the first one, actually they could have just said, we're going to put a fake moon on your moon, and people probably would have been like, okay.
But really, we're all struggling to take the best picture of the moon or stars, but they pretty much look the same. Like a computer can predict exactly how they'll look, so why not?
What
just
if
drop
it
something
doesn't? Yeah, so I think that was our last one. Gotta say, don't love this camera, but I think it was a pivotal moment, and I think that that's where we're heading. Time will only tell. It's still, we're very much in this history, so I think we'll have to wait a little while to see what happens. But I'm thinking AI is the way forward, and we'll probably see it on our actual cameras as well.
In the comments below, tell us what we missed. Like, what camera do you think changed the history of photography forever? And don't forget to check out our sponsor, Squarespace, where you can go and set up a website, a domain name of your own, an online store, take appointments from clients, whatever you can imagine starts at squarespace.com/Chelsea. There you'll get a free trial, no commitment required. Try it out, set it up, see how beautiful it can be and how easy it is to use. And then after your free trial, when you love it, the coupon code Chelsea will get you 10% off.
Also, don't forget to check out our other podcasts about the history of these brands. The Kodak one I recommend. It is shocking. I thought it would be so boring.
Upsetting, actually. Like, I was upset with
Shocking.
some of the stuff we discovered.
The Leica one is very uplifting and good, just a really solid, great history. I think the Sony history is also another fun one. Like, they started with a rice cooker. I thought that one was really fun. They're all good, actually, to pat us on the back. Well, their history is good, you know. But anyway, thank you so much, and thanks for watching the Picture This Photography podcast. Thanks.
Bye.